Dina. Welcome to the webinar, Digital Transformation Leadership. Welcome to a new game, which is presented by Joseph Press and Leora Gross of the Center for Creative Leadership, or more simply, CCL. My name is Tracy Dobbins, and I'm your event moderator for today. If you're just getting us to know us, CCL is a top-ranked provider of executive education globally. We work with 2/3 of the world's top 500 companies, small business and government, providing innovative solutions for the entire organization and programs proven to transform the individual. Our work is based on significant research from our own elite teams to the finest global sources, and we share it with you readily today in this discussion. Today's webinar is especially exciting for us here at CCL because it is the first in our new thought leadership series, Future Fluency. In the weeks and months ahead, we'll be continuing to offer more content on this topic and many others that are relevant to preparing yourself and your organization to lead into the future. Now, before our presenters begin, I just want you to know that we love participation and invite you to use the chat tool provided on the right side of your screen. And just direct your chat to host, presenter, and panelists, or you can use all participants. We'll have a formal question and answer session at the end of the webinar. And again, as Regina mentioned, look for a link, an email with a link to the recorded session of the webinar and a new white paper by Joseph Press, as well as other related resources that will be in your email box tomorrow. With all the details behind us, I'd like to welcome our two presenters, Leora Gross, General Manager, CCL, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Joseph Press, Global Innovator and Strategic Advisor. Welcome, Leora and Joseph.
Thank you so much, Tracy, and greetings to everybody on board.
Thank you, Tracy. We're very excited to have the opportunity to present our latest findings and work in the topic of digital transformation leadership. Let's jump into the webinar with the next slide. Today, what we're going to be covering is a very clear need on the topic of digital transformation. Our digital world is changing as we speak. We're seeing the use of digital technologies in both our personal and private lives, and we're going to talk about some of the impacts on our roles and our organizations. Then I'm going to turn it over to Leora, who is going to share with you our latest insights and actual practices on preparing leaders for digital transformation. And then we're going to wrap up with asking yourselves a couple of real key questions and then giving you the opportunity to ask us some questions as well. So with that, let's jump into the game. Next slide, please. So for most of us, we are in touch with digital in some way in our lives, either through our smartphones, which in actuality are supercomputers that we have in our pockets. Some of us have devices that are tracking our heart rates and other health-related information. Some of us also have home devices that we're able to speak to turn lights on, control temperatures, and even open up doors. Many of us have heard about artificial intelligence, blockchain, robotics. Lots of buzzwords are out there, but what we do know is that there's significant changes coming. For those of us who are digital natives, or for those who are parents, you probably are seeing how digital is influencing the way that all of us are interacting with our peers and family members. Next slide, please. Tracy, can we go to the next slide?
Yes, it's up. Slide 5 is showing CCL's Digital Transformation Readiness Survey. Joseph, can you hear?
Okay.
Leora, maybe you can pick up here. I'm not sure where Joseph.
And one of the wonders of digital technologies is when it's not working, you definitely feel the pain. Speaking of challenges around digital transformation, we've recently conducted a digital transformation readiness survey. And globally, what we found out was that the top challenges that most organizations face, it's not about technology, but it's actually about people, and specifically the leaders in organizations that have to move digital transformation forward. Starting at the top, the challenge of insufficient internal skills is top of mind of most organizations. What are digital tools? How can we use them? What's the role of data? How can we actually create new apps that are going to engage both our customers and our employees? Those are the kinds of skills that are required. In addition, 46% of organizations said that there was a lack of a clear vision of what a digital customer journey is. In other words, what is the digital enablers that are going to enable customers to buy products, to engage in services, and feel a connection to our organizations. Third, at 36%, is the classic challenge of integrating new technologies. Integrating new technologies is nothing new. Today, we just add the word digital, but for many of us who have been in the business environment for years, we've had to implement ERP solutions, we've had to implement CRM solutions. The list of acronyms go on. The bottom line is always changing of technology is still a challenge within existing organizations. And lastly, a resistance to change. New technology requires new behaviors and new skills and mindsets, and also changes in the organization, new roles and responsibilities, new processes. These are some of the key challenges that most leaders are facing globally when it comes to the topic of digital transformation. There is one fundamental challenge that we also think is critical, and it ties into all of the challenges that we see here. Tracy, next slide. What is digital transformation? This is a challenge because the word digital transformation is such a hot topic now, and there is not enough common understanding of what transformation means. Let's start at the bottom, which is a more basic view of what digital transformation is. It is implementing new technologies to transform processes, to improve efficiencies, reduce complexities, capture data, enable growth. These are a number of the transformations that, again, have been around in organizations for the last 30 or 40 years as new technologies are continually integrated within the organization. New processes means new responsibilities, new roles, new organizations. Those are significant impacts, and that is at the core of digital transformation. If we move up, transforming products and services, the way that organizations engage consumers to increase sales, but also to strengthen brand identity, to ensure in today's social world that brand ambassadors happen across the globe, not only within an organization. New digital technologies also means creating new interfaces. So all those cool apps and good-looking websites that you see out there, those are the result of digital transformation. The people changes that are required to make those happen, it is all about being customer-centric. It's also being sensitive to good design. Those are key behaviors that are new when we talk about the digital transformation products. That top line is the nirvana. It is where many organizations are trying to go, the digital transformation of platforms. For those of you who have used Uber or Airbnb, or even purchased on Amazon. You will see digital technologies creating new business models, and new business models in a platform environment also create new partners, bringing together buyers and sellers together with no intermediary. This is all about digital transformation to create these platforms that deliver new benefits across a value chain. This is a critical driver and aspiration for many digital transformation projects, although it is the hardest to achieve. Next slide, please. What we see across all the digital transformation initiatives, be it processes, products, or platforms, is what we refer to as a digital transformation trifecta. What we mean by that is, in order to accelerate the transformation that's required to implement digital, there are three key areas that have to be part of any digital transformation agenda. Number one, there has to be a clear mandate to innovate, to use new technologies, to think differently about how do you engage new markets and create new products and services. This is an essential driver for all digital transformation initiatives. That is really about the why. Why will digital create new value for the organization? Why will it create a new brand identity? When we talk about the why, we've got to have the how. And the how is really about designing. It's designing in a way that uses co-creation to create that shared future vision. Understanding what innovation means is not about ideas in organizations, about creating and designing a common language. And the what is all about digital. It's data, it's robotics, it's Internet of Things, it's using social media for new channels, for brand building. It's using communities as a way to strengthen messages and grow services and also new ideas. Having digital at the core will transform products, processes, and platforms, doing it in a co-creative way, using design and design thinking as one methodology, agile is another methodology, always looking at the customer at the center. Those are all the key elements of design. Those will help a digital transformation achieve those innovation objectives. Next slide, please. So to bring just a little bit of color, I'd like to walk you through a digital transformation story, which started actually 5 years ago at a global food and beverage company. The global lead for digital marketing asked us to lead a series of digital days, which were initially focused on just providing the leadership and understanding of what digital is. Those digital days all had a methodology behind them, which was inspired by design thinking. And they all ended with a clear intention to identify innovation initiatives. So again, in those digital days, we saw digital as a starting point, design as a methodology, and innovation as our objective. The outcomes of those digital days have had significant impact on the organization, the transformation, and its positioning within both the markets and also internally. One concrete outcome was the establishment of an internal idea platform, which has generated over 100 concrete ideas with real impact. Another idea that came out of those digital days and was implemented was a transformation of the learning and development function to focus on creating digital leaders, creating project-based learning, moving away from frontal learning, having real innovation initiatives and using design thinking has been a critical catalyst in creating over 4,000 design thinkers. And the learning and development function partnered with the IT organization to create a design thinking center of excellence, which is continuing to drive design thinking as a critical methodology across the organization. It's exciting to see how that transformation trifecta can have impact across the organization and within markets. Next slide, please. So if we look at how we have been able to help this organization and many others, it's been being upfront with leadership at the beginning of our transformation initiatives to make sure that the critical dimensions of digital transformation are in place. First and foremost, the importance of digital and digitalizing the organization in order to be future-proofed. A clear strategic intent. In the example of food and beverage, it was moving away from food and beverage towards health and wellness. Also having some stories and experiences to then share with the rest of the organization, and also having customer stories using some of these new digital prototypes and sharing that with other consumers. Building a talent pool, very much at the heart of digital leadership and that design thinking organization that I mentioned. Bringing the outside in is always a powerful catalyst for cutting through some of the challenges between functions and business units. And concretely, that means not just bringing the consumer into these digital experiences, but also bringing partners with the intent of creating an ecosystem. Executing is always a critical element, and in the digital world, it's about prototypes and pilots, and developing those platforms and processes that will enable those pilots to be able to be successful or to learn quickly from failure. Creating a culture is where leadership begins to come into play, communicating the importance of digital and achieving significant meaning for all of the transformation initiatives. And then lastly is creating transformative leaders who are able to move the digital transformation agenda forward. Next slide, please. What we saw in this client experience and others is the importance of a digital savvy leader, that they're able to look into the future, that they're always staying on innovation's edge. They use digital in their personal and professional lives. They're always reaching out to cultivate partnerships, and they get excited about the opportunity to revolutionize, not just change, but make significant impact on their organizations. They're always communicating out via the social media channels that are available both internally and externally. And they're always talking about the importance of digital within their organization and also outside with customers. And they personally are looking for ways to accelerate their transformative journey. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Leora to do a deep dive into what we at CCL believe to be as the essential enablers of a digital transformation leader.
Thank you, Joseph. So with this as context, I'm going to turn to a client story where we are developing digital leaders to transform themselves and their organization. This is a 3-year journey, so I've selected elements to share which will describe some of the approaches that we're engaging in. One of the earliest challenges we had with this client was to describe what exactly is digital leadership? What must leaders do differently? While we can argue that the fundamentals of leadership may stay the same, the way we show up as leaders with future fluency requires a completely new approach. Now, our client did not want to be prescriptive in this, which I do support. So we move away here from things like traditional competency models to creating an understanding of what leaders need to achieve in their context. So let's look first at the fundamentals by understanding leadership in any context. And we can ask 3 key questions. The first one is, do we as leaders create direction in terms of setting meaningful digital futures? So the work of a leader is to create connections between the digital strategy, specific business goals, and to see the link to future competitive advantage. And this forms the vision for the work ahead. So to do this, as Joseph was saying, we need to be very clear on the why. In other words, what is the purpose and opportunity of digital in this journey? And I'm highlighting this especially as a conscious move away from the broad let's go digital by introducing one or two isolated technologies or platforms to creating real clarity on what is the opportunity that we are trying to address, or what is the customer problem we are trying to solve, and how does this eventually become part of the culture and the operating model. So our first element of work at CCL is to help leaders decode strategy and prioritize what to do going forward. Secondly, we can ask, are people and systems aligned? And as digital transformation challenges the sustainability of traditional business models, leaders need to align roles, build innovation capability, cultivate the right partnerships, and build collaboration. And so what we've learned is that without getting the internals right, we cannot make digital a reality. And we definitely can't accelerate the journey to then scale digital. So to sum it up, the second element of our work is to build capability and resources and get people working in the right way. Thirdly, we can ask, are we creating commitment by sharing our story and being digital leaders? And we need to create the compelling story of the digital journey, as Joseph was mentioning. We also need to be very comfortable with the language of digital to reinforce its value and importance. And many of our leaders have limited exposure to digital experiences. So one of the features of our work is to immediately immerse leaders in an exciting digital world to create awareness and energy. And added to this, there is a set of challenges around leading and managing change. And as I'm sure you well know, this is not a predictable journey. So we need to help leaders to deal with disruptive and continuous change. And often this change happens across virtual or digital communities with a much broader ecosystem of partners. So with our clients, we talk about creating a movement or leading a revolution as opposed to traditional incremental change efforts. So the third element is around leading change and transforming culture. So at CCL, we believe that leadership is a social process. It's done together, and how we work together as a cohesive group to produce those collective results. And the shared and relational nature of leadership is more important than ever in the digital environment. So we can say that effective leadership should produce three critical outcomes aligned to the three questions that I was asking. It's about the creation of direction, alignment, and commitment. And this is very important because in the client environment that I'm going to be talking about, we decided that the key driver of transformation would be the creation of direction, alignment, and commitment in the organization, and that we would need to set up the right set of behaviors, interactions, or exchanges to support that. So let's have a look at the leadership framework in more detail. Next slide, please. Here we developed a framework on digital leadership for this particular client, and at its core, we maintain that the fundamental role of leaders is to create direction, alignment, and commitment in the transformation journey, which you'll see in the outer circle. And to do this, we need to help leaders to think differently, to create new mindsets, to act differently, to make transformation tangible, and to influence differently to create the movement. Then we have developed a set of behaviors that indicate direction-oriented leader behavior. That is, how to think as a future seeker, a digital shaper, and a customer ambassador. And the same with alignment, how to act as an ecosystem builder, a transformer, and an accelerator. And commitment, how to influence as a talent maker, culture catalyst, and influencer of change. I'd like to mention also at this time that this framework is available through CCL as an online survey. I'll describe these behaviors in a moment. At this stage, I would like to point out that while we use these behaviors to guide our leadership programs and the change initiatives in our client, we offered them to leaders as suggestions rather than absolutes. And the reason is that a core part of our work here is facilitating leaders to set direction and to prioritize what they need to do to create alignment and commitment in their own language. So to offer some brief descriptions of these behaviors you see in front of you. Firstly, thinking to create direction. The future seeker constantly looks to the future to analyze how digital trends can redefine your business or your work. The digital shaper speaks to the ability to use digital and analytics to improve decision-making and create new growth opportunities. And the customer ambassador focuses on customer insights and empathy to guide decisions. If we look at acting to create alignment, the ecosystem builder creates a networked, flexible, dynamic, multidisciplined environment to build the right partnerships both inside and outside of the organization. The transformer designs the right processes and defines work to support innovation and transformation. And the accelerator encourages agile or lean, rapid prototyping, and fast-tracking ideas to scale. Then we move to influencing to create a movement. The talent maker sources and develops talent, acts as a role model to develop the next generation of digital leaders, and focuses on inclusiveness and collaboration. The culture catalyst promotes shared values, demonstrates learning agility, and role models the use of digital. And the influencer tells compelling stories about the digital opportunity and builds trust and confidence around the digital future. So that is the setup for the leadership framework. Next slide, please. Another initial action we took with this client was to survey where they see themselves in their digital journey through a readiness assessment. Essentially, we recognize 4 stages of readiness. The first is around just discovering digital, then moving to adopting it, being a transformed organization, and then internalizing digital to such an extent that it is a differentiator. I'm going to describe these very briefly. Next slide, please, Tracy. So briefly, level 1 on discovering reflects a newness and a limited understanding and isolated areas where technology may typically be used for marketing or customer-facing sites or for some functional processing. Next slide, please. Level 2, which is around adopting, shows an awareness and a willingness to put the building blocks in place. And this can manifest as prototypes or internet-based customer service platforms, increased use of social media. You might see limited robotic automation, and a statement that innovation and agility are core cultural attributes. Next slide, please. Level 3 focuses on transforming and recognizes the full strategic imperative of digital, and this results in significant investment in technology platforms, in talent, and in building capability to make this happen. Digital and innovation is seen as a key talent and a key capability and is rewarded across the business. Next slide, please, Tracy. Level 4 really focuses on differentiating, and this is where digital capability is embedded in all systems and processes. There is also shared internal and external acceptance that this is a digital company. Digital knowledge and competency is a core capability, and you'll see seamless integration of talent inside and outside the company. And importantly, as you'll see here, disruption becomes a way of doing things, a way of being. Next slide, please. So to come back to our client story, the digital readiness assessment showed that the client stood at an overall measurement of 2.8. So that is a high level of adopting with readiness to shift to level 3, which is around transforming. and so began our transformation journey with them. Next slide, please. This picture shows the details of the readiness assessment in the second concentric blue circle. At this stage, I would like to focus on the outer gray circle, which describes the journey designed with the client. The client is an ex-government institution, very large, very bureaucratic, and hierarchically driven. So their key needs are to transform culture, to deliver agile processes, and to build talent to support their digital transformation strategy. Our role with this client is to help leaders imagine a digital future and then prioritize and design digital capabilities to enable their culture and foster end-to-end collaboration across their silos. We then need to deliver digital innovation, test it, and scale it. And hence, what you can see before you is the journey, outlined in the gray outer circle: imagine, design, innovate, and scale. At this stage, we're working between phases 2 and 3, design and innovate, scale. To share some more details with you, in the imagine phase, we launched a digital leadership summit to create the experience. On opening, leaders were immersed in a digital forest that simulated a journey through their key industry verticals. They then engaged in 2 days of engagement with thought leaders and customers, followed by imagining and creating stories around the digital future and setting their strategic priorities. These priorities were designed collaboratively with customers and focused on helping leaders to integrate across the silos in their value chain. Following that, we have a series of programs that build strategic leadership and help leaders to transform culture and capability, as well as to accelerate innovation initiatives. We have also initiated a larger scale change program to encourage adoption of digital by leaders, as many have not made the shift themselves to engaging with digital, being online, and being part of digital communities. So some of the highlights of their senior leadership program include a customized digital simulation that mirrors this company and its strategy. And through this gaming approach, leaders are enabled to grapple with the strategic choices they must make and to understand how to decode strategy to enable their own future. And so they come away from this with a clear set of strategic execution and leadership actions which they are putting into place. They've also articulated direction, alignment, and commitment for their group and for themselves. And then some of their key activities include what they call executive initiatives as innovation prototypes, where they are linked to strategic projects and they are testing for areas of immediate implementable change that can then be scaled up in the organization. So that hopefully gives you a flavor of the journey that we're engaged in, how we are defining and developing digital leadership, and how we're embedding this in a process of change and transformation. I'm going to stop now and hand back to Joseph.
Thank you, Leora. The core of that experience and what we're seeing with other clients is a willingness for leaders to disrupt themselves, to disrupt their roles, to disrupt their identity, and to disrupt meaning. Why do we see this as being the fundamental question for successful digital transformation? Because there are many questions that are keeping leaders up at night today. How might I use data, analytics, and AI to improve my ability to understand customers and enable better decision-making? How might I innovate to create new products and services in businesses while improving ongoing operations? How might I establish communities of customers, employees, and experts to contribute to my organization? And how might I transform my organization to stimulate and sustain personal, organizational, and societal growth? These key questions are keeping many leaders up at night, and they need to have the opportunity to disrupt their role, to move away from being a traditional CEO to becoming a chief ecosystem officer that cultivates a broad network of collaborators and partners to stimulate a movement towards a better future. A CIO could become a chief intelligence officer, gathering data, developing algorithms, and using machine learning to increase the intelligence of the organization and its partners. The CMO can become a chief maker officer, leading developers, hackers, and gamers and robotics experts to prototype, fail fast, and rapidly bring new products and services to market. These roles have to change to be successful in a digital world. And to help leaders, we encourage a reflection on identity. Identity is not just within an organization, but looking outside, becoming a consumer, to use experiences to develop new, more meaningful ideas, to be a neuroscience, understanding how decisions, impressions, and behaviors are made in shaping innovation outcomes. Why not become a mad scientist, experimenting in creative ways that take calculated risks to explore the what if? And be a revolutionary, challenging the status quo by asking questions, why not? And we believe it's critical to be a catalyst, to facilitate iterations within innovation, to drive the transformation of strategy, organizations, and market presence. Ultimately, what we need is the call of a potential meaning waiting to be filled by us. To paraphrase Viktor Frankl, meaning is essential for leaders to drive digital transformation with passion. Meaning for a person, whoever is using the products and services your organization is creating. Meaning for the organization that creates both tangible value, i.e. financial, and intangible value, the brand. And ultimately, in today's environment, it's critical to have meaning for society. Who does your organization's purpose directly or indirectly influence? These three areas, role, identity, and meaning, are essential for achieving digital transformation. And for the majority of leaders who are in role, those roles, identities, and meanings need to be significantly disrupted. And that's where the experience that Leora has just shared with us is a good example of one catalyst for that deep disruption. Next slide, please.
Joseph, the slide change your game is up.
Next slide, please.
Yes, change your game is up now.
So, Tracy, to pick up on this, the three key questions that we can be asking of ourselves and of our teams and organizations is, what can we do to be more digital? What kind of digital transformation can we lead in our organizations? And what can we do to build our digital ecosystems? And these are elements that will enable us to be immediate game changers in the context of digital readiness, and then to recognize where we are in that context and to be able to scale up. So we recognize that every person, every organization is at a different starting point. And if we think back to the digital readiness indicators, we might very well be at different starting points. But what does it take for us to step up to the next level as individuals, within our teams, within our organizations, and in terms of impacting our customers? So I'm going to stop there. If you'd like to move to the next slide, Tracy, and really turn it over to you and open to your questions.
Great. Just please send your questions in. You can send it to all participants, and we'll address those in the order that they are received. Looks like we have one question that's come in already. And just wanted to ask about how do you measure the success of the work? Leora, can you answer that one?
Okay. Thanks, Tracy. Great question. So in the example that I was talking about earlier, we have a number of levels of measurement. So we wanted to be able to look at what individual leaders were doing, how they were taking their new digital awareness back to their teams, how they were making tangible changes in the organization. And also, this organization was tasked with very much a longer-term mission in terms of the impact on society. So what will that look like going forward? So some of the key measurables we're looking at, firstly on an individual level, are what are leaders doing, what actions are they taking to create direction, alignment, and commitment? Then we also look at their engagement. I spoke about the online community and the digital change initiative. So how are they engaging in digital? And the beauty of this, the beauty of being online is that once leaders are online, you can have any number of statistics really to measure their activity. And we've also implemented a gaming approach to bring in an element of competition, and so that we can see when leaders are stepping up and sharing their stories. We're looking at what they're sharing with their teams, and also at the level of direction, alignment, and commitment, showing within their teams, their actual work teams, to the digital transformation strategy. And then very tangibly, the leaders are involved in executive initiatives or business projects where they've taken the strategic digital projects and they're implementing prototypes with a view to scaling those. So tangibly, we can see the impact of those. We can look at the feasibility of those. And then finally, we're looking at the impact on customers and the impact on the broader community, where those projects are integrating with the broader community. So it sounds like a lot. We're actually trying to keep it quite simple, but really it's around making a tangible difference.
Thank you, Laura. Here are a few other questions that we received. Can we not do any digital transformation and keep status quo?
Joseph, would you like to take that? I can't see if Joseph's on. No, it looks like he's off. I think that's one of the core dilemmas that leaders have to face, really, is maintaining the status quo, so business as usual, and at the other end of that is innovating, and we recognize that as a core polarity, that we have to do both and I think it's really around the appetite for change and the ability of leaders to be able to do the both and so it can look very different, I think, in different organizations. So sometimes it's a massive widespread change to complete digital transformation, but more often we see the breakaway of units and almost a phased approach, which really might follow the readiness approach or digital maturity levels. So a phased approach to implementing as we start small and then we notch up a level and notch up a level and notch up a level until it becomes more pervasive. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Laura. Are you seeing many organizations creating these new positions like future seeker, ecosystem builder, talent maker to essentially remake their organization and position?
Tracy, would you mind repeating that?
Yes, are you seeing many organizations creating these new positions like future seeker, ecosystem builder, talent maker to essentially remake their organization and positions?
So yes, some of the more common ones are the ones that Joseph mentioned. I think that we see things like customer experience architects, for example. I think that the ones that you saw in our survey that I put up was more related to behaviors. So we haven't seen all of those titles, but certainly they are required in many of the roles that, and many of the shifting roles that people are being asked to do.
Thank you. Another question, are there any guides on how to prepare a roadmap for digital transformation in an organization? Is it possible at all to develop a digital transformation roadmap?
Okay, I see Joseph back on. Joseph, would you like to respond?
Yeah, you're able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, wonderful question. There are a number of resources that are available today, and it's just as easy to go online to type in Google digital transformation roadmap. I do think it's important to keep in mind that there is a business roadmap, which is going to be focused on innovation and implementation of new technologies. But there's also a leadership and change roadmap that also has to be taken into consideration. So what do I mean by that? A digital transformation always begins with a view of how digital can change the products and services that we bring to market. Most digital transformation initiatives don't already ask the question, how can we co-create that vision as a way to engage leadership and start the organizational transformation? So being able to bring together business and innovation and the technologies, plus the leadership and organizational and cultural components from the beginning is an essential success factor for bringing digital transformation into organizations.
Thank you, Joseph. Another question, how have you approached justifying the additional cost for organization digitalization?
So in most cases, the transformation always will imply changes in processes, which imply changes in roles, which imply changes in the organization. So in most transformation initiatives, that is part of the transformation initiative. There has always been a challenge of, well, how do you get change, communication, and training into a budget? And to be quite honest, I don't think there are any easy answers. The difference today is that we are usually leading transformation using agile methodologies. There's much more of an acceptance of piloting and prototyping. And design thinking is becoming standard way of designing those new processes, different than 10, 15 years ago, where we would come with global templates, agreed on process flows and activity steps. That was much more of a top-down approach to change. So change, I think, in one hand is easier because it is more interactive and there's more of an expectation to co-create, but there is still a challenge of securing budgets, and that's where I think, Leora, maybe you could add how innovative your client is by connecting digital transformation with a standing up of a leadership academy.
Yes, very much so. Thanks, Joseph. So I think unlike what we might see as an internal academy in many organizations, what this client does is it set up a digitalization academy which has two arms. One arm is around leadership development, and the other arm is around digital development. And the academy really will serve as an incubator. So not only is it the catalyst for change within the organization, but it's also the catalyst for change across the entire the entire nation. And so what it will be doing is it will be training, developing, and also incubating business innovations across the country. So in this way, firstly by the way that they're designing and innovating and prototyping inside themselves, but secondly, encouraging it externally and creating that cross-collaboration, they're setting themselves up to be an instrument of change and also creating funding around that. Joseph, did you want to add anything to that?
Just to say that that's an excellent example of the digital transformation trifecta: incubation for innovation, the interactivity and co-creation of top leaders using design, and clearly having digital as a catalyst and enabler for the ways that that organization is planning to engage their customers and their country in new, meaningful ways.
And a question for you about how do you best bridge the cultural divide that hampers multinational companies, where some cultures are comfortable in digital apps and fail-fast methodology, and others are much more risk-averse?
So the cultural challenge, again, has always been there, and what we see now with digital technologies is an even more stark difference in cultures, and cultures are not only geographic, but also cultures in terms of generations. And again, there's no magic solution, but we do see that across all cultures, there is more of a willingness to co-create in an interactive way, and that's where design is a very powerful methodology. When you bring a customer into the conversation, you tend to cut through those cultural and generational differences. There's always been a wonderful trick that marketing departments use when they're coming up with new brand concepts. They have a chair in their meeting which is empty, and when necessary, they turn around and ask the chair, "Customer, what do you think?" And that's a powerful way to bridge some of those cultural and generational challenges.
And a question from Frederick. Can the digital transformation process, vision, strategy, culture change, and implementation, can it be totally externalized?
So I'll pipe in on that one very quickly. A definite answer of no. And the reason is that the only way transformation can happen is through leaders owning where are they going, how are they getting there, when and what are they doing. Those are the critical elements for leadership to own digital transformation, which cannot be outsourced. Leora?
Absolutely agreed, 100%. And I think if you think around the processes, the journey that we've been describing, you'll see that they're all completely collaborative. It's all around setting and framing in your own context as a leadership, as an organization. So I would agree 100% with you, Joseph. It's not an external business at all.
And question from Charlie: as leaders, how should we engage in social media as part of our marketing mix? Should we invest just enough to learn, Or should we invest more aggressively to lead our industry?
So when we look at social media, there's a very hot topic which is called digital marketing transformation. And I would suggest that we could probably have another webinar on that topic. Social media is a new and dynamic channel. The data that's being generated is having fundamental changes in marketing, and it has to be something that any organization that is either certainly B2C, but also B2B, has to take into account this, new, very important channel to market.
Thank you, Joseph. Another question, how can employees' individual digital fluency influence the success of the digital transformation within the organization? How do you overcome the challenge?
Yeah. So that's a great question, and one which I was alluding to earlier. And I think that the lack of digital fluency, but probably the higher the lack of digital fluency, the higher the possibility of resistance to change or slowness to change. And so it's about adoption and getting people comfortable with adoption. And so what we've been trying to do in our work is to create and introduce digital in an exciting, non-threatening way. And this is where things like immersions and things like gaming come into play. At the back of that, so really to remove that fear and that trepidation. And then at the back of that is to have a very well thought out methodical change strategy. Now again, it's not a typical change strategy. It's focused on two things. The first thing it's focused on is encouraging user adoption. Now, how can we get people to embrace digital in a non-threatening way? The second thing is around creating a movement. And I'm going to use a medical analogy here. It's almost similar to creating a virus. So when you start small and you start with cells of change, think of a virus cell. The one cell infects the next cell, and the virus grows and grows and grows. And so inherent, I think, in the approach to adoption and to digital fluency is starting small and getting people comfortable and then spreading the virus as people then go online, enter into digital communities. And if anybody, whoever's been in a digital community will see how these things can really spread and expand and grow the virus.
Thank you, Leora. We have reached the end of our time here today, but we thank you, Leora and Joseph, for sharing how organizations meet today's challenging business requirements while laying the foundation for those of the future. I can conclude our program for today, but we ask you to be on the lookout for a follow-up email tomorrow, which will include a link to the webinar recording, also a link to a new white paper by Joseph Press, and our other future fluency resources. We hope you enjoyed the session and will join us again for a future webinar. As you exit the webinar,